Before we get into today's podcast, I wanted to tell you about a giveaway I'm doing with Sekonic light meters for my 200th episode, which is coming up on February 11th. The good people over at Sekonic Meters have donated one of their Sekonic L858D light meters that I'm going to be giving away. All you need to do to enter is go to the Photo Banter YouTube page, hit subscribe, and leave a comment on the 200th episode giveaway video, and you'll be entered for a chance to win the Sekonic L858D light meter. And like I said, all you have to do to enter is go to the Photo Banter YouTube page, hit subscribe, and leave a comment on the 200th episode giveaway video, and you'll be entered for a chance to win. You just got to enter by February 10th, and I'll be announcing the winner on episode 200 on February 11th. So thanks so much, good luck, and remember to go enter, and you'll have a chance to win this Sekonic meter. And without further ado, we'll get into today's episode. Welcome to the Photo Banter podcast. I'm your host, Alex Gagne, and on today's podcast, I speak with photographer Peter Prato. Peter has worked with clients such as the New York Times, Wired, Outside Magazine, and Airbnb, to name a few. In this interview, I speak to Peter about studying creative writing in college and what eventually led him to pursue a career in photography. I also speak to Peter about one of his personal projects titled Game of Chance, which he has been working on since 2003, photographing playing cards he has found on the streets in hopes of putting together a full deck someday. Beyond shooting editorial and commercial work, Peter has also collaborated with award-winning film production company A24. Peter is someone who brings a lot of passion to whatever project he's working on, so I was happy to get a chance to speak with him about his journey with photography. So I hope you enjoy, and thanks so much for listening. All right, and now welcome on Peter Prato, photographer based in San Francisco, right, Peter?
That's correct. Yep, right in the heart.
How you doing, man? It's been a crazy year for everybody, but how you hanging in there, man? How's life on the West Coast?
You know, so I feel like every time I ask someone how they're doing, I immediately wish I could just jump in and say, sorry, I asked.
Yeah.
Because it's such a big answer. But
Yeah.
Overall, I'm feeling, I'm of two minds. I've felt a lot of stress this year, and I think a lot of people have.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't really been able to figure out how to talk about that stress. And I also feel very grateful. And there are a bunch of reasons for that, not the least of which is that my family's healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Although we know people that have gotten sick, everyone that we know personally has recovered.
Yep.
And we live in a place where people are taking this thing seriously. And that has, I think, felt safe for us. We also live in a place where we've been able to go outside, like it gets chilly here, but we don't get snow. For us, it's just like a damp cold.
Well, you guys don't get snow, but you guys get insane fires, which you guys had a few months ago, and it was like the apocalypse out there.
That was where it started. That was the hardest period of the year for me personally, which is feeling like everything that felt unsafe about 2020 was compounded.
Yep.
And we were really like stuck inside. There was a good 3, 4, 5 days where I didn't feel like I could take my son outside without causing like literal damage to his lungs.
Yeah, man.
And that, I think, is in a way probably what a lot of people feel and have felt, on a day-to-day basis everywhere in this country.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I feel like we've been shielded in San Francisco from what other big cities have had to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so, I'm grateful for that, but obviously this year's been tough, man. We're feeling it in all kinds of ways.
Yeah. And in terms of like photographically, have you still kind of been inspired to make pictures? Like, I know a lot of people have this kind of delved into photographing projects during this crazy time, but like, how have you you still feel inspired, or where you kind of at creatively right now?
That's a good question. It's come and gone in waves. At the beginning of the year, I was feeling like things were just they were going in the right direction. I'd had a very busy end. All of 2019 was good for me.
Yeah.
And I came into 2020 feeling like, cool, like even though January can be a slow month, I had a lot of momentum behind me. And then when the shutdown happened, my joke at first was like, "Welcome to being a professional photographer, America." Like, like just don't know what's going to happen next,
Yeah.
at least with work. And so for that month, I felt like there was kind of a strange sort of guilt lifted, which I associate with having a schedule that's abnormal, and at times can seem
Yeah.
um, like I'm not working when everybody else is. Like I might go for a run in the middle of the day, or swim in the middle of the day, or I might go surf in the middle of the day, and that can seem a little irresponsible. But then there are those days where I'm working till like 1 in the morning,
Yeah.
or I'm working through a weekend. So I was just like, cool, like I'm gonna focus on what I was already focused on, and I was feeling like it was an opportunity for me to slow down and kind of look a little bit more closely at my local environment. Um, and then it's just it's come and gone. Like there
Yeah.
have been months where I've just not felt at all like making photos,
Hmm.
um, and some of that's been, I think, being stuck inside and looking at the internet and watching people make inspiring work and feeling like,
Yeah.
what's wrong with me? Like, why am I not out there, like, making something inspiring out of this,
Yeah.
and learning that lesson again, which is like, you got to take it easy on yourself, especially in this line of work, because
Oh,
it's easy to compare
totally.
oneself.
Oh yeah, man. It's the trap. And I talk about it constantly on this podcast, man. It's the constant mental warfare that as creative people, man, because we're all trying to get your work out there. You got goals, you want to get it published, and you're comparing. But like the thing I always got to remind myself is like, yeah, the people I'm looking up to, they're like 10 years in front of me or like 5 years in front of me. And it's just like it's
Yeah.
not a comparison thing. But yeah, I struggle with the same shit all the time. I was like, man, because I saw like so many people doing like the virtual portrait stuff, like people doing real creative stuff and like
Mhm.
creative stuff, and hats off to them. But like, I don't know, I just wasn't really interested in it. So I was kind of been like, oh, yeah, like you said, just kind of taking it how it comes. And if I feel inspired to make something, I'll do it. And, just one day at a time, brick by brick.
Yeah, it's surprising to me the number of times I've had to reset my own expectations around what brings me joy with photography.
Yep.
And I think that's a complicated process for anyone that's made a career out of something that is traditionally thought of as creative.
Yeah.
Because partially, you're asking for people's attention. And
Yep.
I think that, in the first few months of the shutdown, I didn't feel comfortable sharing work I was excited about, because people were scared, and
Yeah.
and they were I didn't know how to celebrate something at a time when people were losing their jobs, and we were all kind of wondering what was going to happen next. And then uh, when the protests, when Black Lives Matter protests started happening, it felt also like
Hmm.
now is not the time for me to be sharing my work. And some of that too is just like, I think, my own self doubt, and thinking like, well, it's not as good as what other people are doing, so
Yeah.
what's the point? And then I came through that, and I was like, oh wait, no, I still do have something to say. I have an opinion about the world, and how I see it, and that's okay too. And I'm excited to share that. So coming back to your question about where I'm at creatively now, a lot of the last month and a half has been finalizing this process that I started really last year, but uh, thinking about, how do I want to present my work in a new light. And
Hmm.
so I've got this promo that I've been working on that I'm very
Yeah.
excited about and proud of, and there are a few people that helped me kind of that shepherded me through that process creatively as well. So it's those collaborations that have really kept me thinking, like, feeling excited, and thinking about my work in a new way.
No, that's exciting. Yeah, let me pull up the promo and people can check it out because it came out really cool. And the coolest thing about it is that you had like you're a really good writer. Um,
Oh, thanks, man.
and like little excerpts, which I mean I struggle with writing, but I think the writing stuff just kind of adds a lot to photography a lot of the times. So I guess with this promo piece, like This is something I've been talking to a lot of people about because advertising your business nowadays is real tough because everyone's working from home. So
Yep.
is this piece, is it just going to be a digital promo piece, or do you think you're going to print this at some point, or what's kind of your goal with this, I guess, putting this out?
Yeah, the goal is to print it, and I just received the proof last week, and so I've gone through that, and I have my wife, who is a very, very talented designer and has been working in graphic design, among other fields or among other genres of design for a long time. And we're just kind of checking it for color, making sure everything looks good, and making final notes. But it's pretty much there. And so the goal is to get it physically into people's hands early in the new year.
Hmm.
And the reason for that is twofold. The first, I've never really put something like this together before,
Yep.
and a lot of credit goes to my designer George McCallum and his assistant Ali, and they were the ones that took my work and then laid it out in a
Hmm.
way that allowed me to see it in a kind of a fresh light. And then the second reason that I want to get this into people's hands is because I feel like everybody's been staring at a screen for a year.
Yep.
And the thing that I've consistently heard over and over again is that editors, especially, but anyone that loves photography, they prefer the tactile experience
Hmm.
of it, and whether it's holding a print or holding a promo or a book, or actually being there. A lot of editors that I know are also very talented photographers,
Yeah.
and so the joy of actually being able to flip through something, I think is, at least my opinion is that it'd be well timed when people are stuck inside.
And how are you,
And
and how,
I,
yeah, and like, how are you approaching like who you're gonna mail it to? Because that's the thing I was kind of curious about. Is like, because before it was easy, you could go on like whatever, go online, you find whatever magazine or client you want to send it to, you find their office address and you mail it to them. But
yeah,
now it's like everyone's working from home. So are you basically mailing it to existing clients and people you've kind of met along the line, or like how are you kind of approaching who you're gonna mail it to? Because before you could just mail promo pieces to people you never met before, but now it's kind
yeah,
of tough. It's like, hey, can I get your home address? And I've never met you
yeah,
before.
yeah.
Like, how's this kind of the logistics of this gonna work?
So that's a good question, and it dovetails with what I think is one of the reasons why I've never done this before, which is that I took the very long, slow, kind of asymmetrical approach. I think as far as the industry is concerned, uh, I can't speak to what is like the most common way of doing this, but I think for a long time it was people just digging through the internet trying to find email addresses and
Yep.
then emailing many times trying to get somebody's attention, and then if
Hmm.
they could either get a meeting in person or
Yep.
mail something to the office, which is slow and laborious, and also expensive too, if you're paying for one of the services that gives you
Yeah, like
access to.
agency access and
Yeah,
things like that.
exactly.
Yep.
And I never really did that, and I think that's one of the reasons why it took me so long to to get editorial work, but also to be able to get to this point, which is that I just didn't quite feel ready for that. And it also just never felt quite right for me to just cold email people
Hmm.
in that way with promo work. Um, I do reach out to people all the time just to get their advice or to get 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Kind of in the same way that we're talking right now, I feel like the internet's a very powerful tool just to get people's attention.
Yep.
And so I built most of my business around kind of presenting as someone who wasn't going to waste anybody's time, was interested, was curious in what they do. And I think a lot of that came by way of other photographers that were like, look, you got to keep showing up. You've got to be diligent. You've got to reach out to people multiple times, but you've also got to make good work. And then when
Yep.
you do get people's attention, you've got to take advantage of their time as respectfully as possible.
Yep.
And so I built relationships over a long period of time with editors that I work with editors that I want to work with, just letting them know like what I'm excited about that they're doing. Because, I think everybody working in this business wants to get some acknowledgement for their hard work.
Definitely.
not just the photographers, but everybody, the designers that lay out the magazines. And so the first wave of mailings will go out to people that I have relationships with, but I've never met in person.
Hmm.
And there are quite a few of them. And then the second wave will be people that I've reached out to that have acknowledged that I'd be interested in sending something to them. And I think, they're smart people. They know I'm not going to waste their time. And
Yeah.
then the third wave will be, I think, reaching out to friends in the industry that might have some advice on how to get it on the desk of people that are not in the office. Because you're right, we're facing a new kind of challenge with people potentially not going back to offices for the
Yeah.
foreseeable future.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's why I've been asking everybody how they it's kind of been approaching marketing, because it is like uncharted territory. But the one thing
Yep.
that's kind of become interesting through this pandemic, I think, is that like Zoom has just become like a like normal thing. Like hitting someone up, because I know tons of people are actually just, you can reach out to photo editors, and I know some photo editors that will, now they can't meet in person, but they'll Zoom with the photographer. They have met to look at their portfolio online, and I've had some friends that have had some success that way. So it's kind of interesting to see the technology now. It's like
Yeah.
people utilizing the stuff to their advantage. But I guess like when you're putting this together, how did you kind of decide like what photos you're going to put into it, and this kind of the editing process, I guess?
Yeah, that began with, so a year ago, I was working with a book designer by the name of Terry Ratzlaff, who's just fantastic.
Yep.
I don't know if he's from Colorado, but I knew of him through Benjamin Rasmussen and the crew out in Denver. Pattern, I don't know if you follow them, but check them out.
I will.
Yeah, they're basically a gang of photographers that are based in Denver. They're doing beautiful work, top to bottom, and celebrating beautiful work, kind of from around the country.
So Patterns like it's like an agency. It's like a
No, Pattern is a building that is one part gallery, one part bookstore, one part studio space, that was co-founded by Benjamin Rasmussen.
okay.
And Ben and Terry are friends. And I think I came onto Terry's work, his bookmaking work through Ben, and reached out to him and eventually hired him to hand make me a portfolio case that's beautiful. And then in tandem to that, I started the process of digging into all my work and figuring out, all right, what are the things that I want to put in the first iteration of this? Because it's Chicago Screwbound, so it wasn't intended to be a permanent collection of work. It's not a monograph.
Yeah.
But I did want to showcase the work I was proud of, but also the work that I want to get.
Mm-hmm.
And so I began that process, and through that process, I had several different edits that a handful of friends helped me lay out. Cole Wilson, one of them, another fantastic photographer. Emily Barisi, amazing photographer, now studying at Yale.
Wow.
They took a look at it. They kind of, gave me back my own work in the way that they saw it. And then I called that down to, I think, probably 50 or 60 images. And then I handed that over to George, who is the lead designer for this. And George and Ali took that work and then came back to me with, I think we've got 27 images in the final promo.
Yeah.
And I, George knows me, and I let them know that the one element of this, which you've already commented on, was that I want to communicate that writing is part of my process.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't really done that except for by way of an occasional newsletter I send out, and then Instagram. And those aren't the best ways to let people know that the writing is an important part of the process for me, because in the future, I would like to do more of that as well.
No, that's awesome. And I won't cover all the photos, but a couple of the pictures, because I'm reading everything. I was just kind of curious the backstory. This story here, which I believe you were photographing at a women's prison. What was it? Was this a personal project or an editorial piece, or how did this kind of come about?
It's a weird one. So I had a client reach out. I can't even remember how they got in touch with me originally. I think it was somebody who had seen some work of mine in maybe the Times, and They were working for a company that was starting a magazine.
Mm-hmm.
Really kind of a strange situation, and that company was a client of the group that contracts with this prison to employ these women in a call center.
Mm.
And they asked me if I was interested in going to Arizona for a day and meeting some of these women and photographing them. And uh, yeah, so I said yes, I was interested. And I could say a lot about this particular shoot, but what I'm touching on in the copy, which is that I was only kind of given glimpses of what I felt like was actually going
Yeah.
on. Uh, it felt a little weird, and so I came away from that feeling like I shot something that this company was promoting in a magazine that they had developed internally,
Yeah.
um, that didn't necessarily want to talk about maybe the full scope of what it means to be in this particular prison in Arizona, which is I think the largest it's the only women's prison in Arizona, and one of the largest, if not the largest prison in Arizona. And this call center has generated a lot of money, like billions of dollars in sales for a variety of companies out there that I don't think like to talk about the fact that their call center is partially staffed by female inmates. That being said, the women that I did meet, both that were currently incarcerated and some of the women that had previously been incarcerated, talked very openly about how this had given them an education and a sense of purpose, and for those that were released, a job that was very positive. So it kind of reminded me that you got to be really careful about going into any circumstance with the idea that the photography is only going to serve a positive purpose.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that is it. I watched some documentary about the prison system and like the for-profit prisons. I don't know if this one is, but there's just a lot of yeah, a lot of crazy stuff that goes in on that industry, and well, it's wild. But how did the women respond to being photographed? Were they all did you,
That was sort of where it was a little bit weird. I mean, they had said yes, they were willing to be photographed, and they were all, lovely and willing to talk. I mean, we weren't together for but maybe a few hours.
Yep.
We were willing to talk about what led them to being incarcerated.
Hmm.
But there were people in the room that I think they didn't feel comfortable speaking candidly around. And
Yep.
so I don't think I got to hear anything but what was the most positive and the most glowing parts of their experience with the program.
Yep.
But I can't imagine that there would be nothing at all negative to say about it.
Yeah.
Uh, and so overall, they were lovely. I chose not to show their faces in this photo because I don't feel like uh, this particular image and the writing that accompanies it is more about how you can end up in a situation where people have agreed to let you photograph them,
Hmm.
but it's not always clear why they agreed to that.
Yeah. No, definitely. No, that's very interesting, and yeah, definitely a tough one. And another portrait, which I definitely related to this, was this portrait of this actor. I've seen him in a couple movies.
Now on the right here,
Yeah, I forget his name.
Lakeith Stanfield is his name.
Yeah, when I believe maybe from what I read, it was like you took a portrait of him, and it wasn't like he wasn't as game as you would hope him to be in the portrait scenario, which I think every photographer can relate to. Uh, it just happens. But what was kind of your
Yeah.
experience? It's a great portrait, but what was kind of your experience kind of making this? I guess.
Yeah, so I was shooting for a production company that hired me to shoot stills for "Sorry to Bother You," which is a Boots Riley film from a couple of years ago.
Oh, great
2000.
movie! Great movie.
So you know
Yeah.
it. Yeah, Boots is a crazy character. So for those of you that don't know, yeah, Oakland rapper who started a band called The Coup. He's beloved in the town of Oakland. He wrote a graphic novel that was optioned by a production company. I think it was originally published by McSweeney's. It was optioned, turned into a film. Boots was given the opportunity to direct, And it's a little bit of a longer story that weaves throughout this promo, but I've been working with actors for a number of years, and my name got tossed into a hat to do some other work for this film, and it led to me shooting stills and some behind the scenes stuff, but mostly production stills.
Yeah.
And this moment with Lakeith, I think I was on set for a total of 7 days. This is one of the days where we were just hanging out in between scenes. And yeah, working with actors on set is a very specific thing. I think on big, multi-million, 10 million and above
Hmm.
shoots, you don't get quite as much access to
Yeah.
actors. But it's like all eyes on them all day long. And I think when they're not on camera, they don't necessarily want someone lurking about with a camera taking pictures.
Yeah.
But we just happened to be hanging out there, and the light was beautiful, and it seemed pretty chill. And yeah, so I asked him if I could just make a portrait, and then I guided him into making what essentially would be kind of version of an editorial portrait that I would make. This is not a production still.
Yeah.
It's not a BTS shot. It was just something that I thought looked cool and was interesting. And you can kind of see the look on his face, which is, well, I guess you can read into that. I don't really know what he was feeling.
I guess I read like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
but I
You can
loved it. It's a great picture. The light's great, the wall and everything. But I just so much related to it because I've had so many instances like that where, as a photographer, it's like you're in this situation and you're like, you kind of there's like an awkwardness to it sometimes. But you're like, you got to push through it because it's
Yeah.
just you got to get a cool photo. If there's like the good light, you just have to push through those situations.
Yeah, people are going to give you what they're going to give you. And when I did have the opportunity, which is again, I think very rare, but I did on this on set for the movie, to get a few minutes at a few key scenes to direct the actors, him, Tessa Thompson, Armie Hammer, back into a scene, which is something that I learned how to do with directors and actors for the stage. They were 100% professional and did exactly what I needed them to do it. This isn't a scene in the movie, and so I don't know what he's giving me. This is just what I got.
Yeah.
And I don't like telling people what to do unless I'm working with an actor who needs to perform a specific emotion for a specific purpose at that moment. And I don't think it's like I said in the copy, it's like sometimes shooting portraits like these is like knocking on a stranger's door and asking if you can have dinner with them.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work like that.
No, I loved it. Because I so much related to it. So that was just kind of showed like where the writing kind of comes into it. Have you always kind of, being that you do photography, you said writing's a big component to your work. What kind of came first for you? Was it photography or writing, or how did that you kind of get into those both kind of mediums, I guess?
Yeah, photography came early in life. My mom and dad gave me a camera when I was a kid, and I used to carry this little 35 millimeter. I think it was like a Kodak camera. I can't remember what model it was.
Yeah.
And I had a little pouch that hung around my neck, and it had it had two pouches actually. It had one for the camera, and then one in front of that could hold one roll of 35 millimeter film.
Nice.
And I just dug it. I grew up in central Pennsylvania, and it was pretty wide open area, and my access to the outside world, this is pre-internet, was TV and magazines, and specifically my aunt and uncle had given me a subscription to National Geographic.
Mm-hmm.
And that was around I was like 8 or 9, about the same time that my mom gave me a camera. And I just thought, man, this is amazing. Like the fact that you can see something and it can inspire you, and you can capture that and then show somebody later what that thing looked like.
Yeah.
It's still one of the things that excites me the most about photography. So that was there as a kid. The writing came later, and I don't know, I think National Geographic certainly, inspired the idea that writing should or could accompany photography, but it wasn't until I actually got to college, which is in Southern California. I went to UCSD, where I thought I should probably reach out to somebody and find out how one becomes a professional photographer, because I just had no idea.
Yeah.
And that was my sophomore year of college. And again, it's not pre-internet at this point, but it's kind of early days. This is back in like 99,
Okay.
99. And I got an email address for somebody at National Geographic, and I wrote to them and I was like, what do I do? And they said, don't study photography. They're
Oh,
like,
really? That's what they told you?
yeah, well, they were pretty candid about it. I don't even remember who it was. I wish I
Yeah.
could find out. So thank you, but they were pretty candid with look, you need to know how to work a camera. You absolutely need to know how to tell a story. But most of our photographers are specialists, and so we recommend interdisciplinary study.
Mm-hmm.
Go focus on something else that will give you a way of understanding how to tell a story specifically about people. I think certainly there are wildlife photographers to whom this applies, but the examples that they gave were anthropology, sociology, and literature. And as a 19-year-old kid, I was like, anthropology, sociology, like what does a sociologist do? Like, just no idea. I could have just walked down to the counselor's office and
Yeah.
found
Yeah.
out. The literature made sense. And I grew up in a house where my dad loved movies, my mom loved books. And so I thought, yeah, I love to read already. Like, I can study that. Great. And National Geographic is saying that that's a path.
Yeah.
And so I started studying literature, and one thing led to another. And that's what got me into working in publishing. So I got interested in writing because I was reading a lot of books. I was surrounded by people that were studying writing, and then I ended up majoring specifically or emphasizing in creative writing.
So were you, when you're studying literature at that point in college, were you still taking pictures just kind of in your own time, or did you kind of put the camera down for a time period, or how did you kind of
Yeah,
get back to shooting pictures more, I guess?
yeah. The camera was around for sure, but not. I wasn't making anything that I could definitively say was a pursuit of photography.
Yeah.
It was still just like
Random stuff.
photography was on a whim,
Mm-hmm.
like I shot a lot of photos of friends around the dorms, and that sort of thing. I did bring my camera with me. I studied abroad in Florence,
Oh,
and I
wow.
brought my camera to Italy with me. And then when I traveled, backpacked around Europe, which again, amazing that I was able to do that. I brought my camera with me and bought a bunch of film and shot, and that was my junior year of college. And that was there was a period between end of high school and my end of college where I was photographing less and I was writing more, and I was interested in painting as well.
Mm.
So kind of got interested in art in general. But it wasn't until kind of the end of college that I was thinking more about how I might bring photography back into my life. But writing had kind of jumped out in front, which is
Yeah.
what led me to working and publishing in New York.
Oh, yeah, I saw that. I looked at your LinkedIn before, and I saw, yeah, you spent some time. I think was it
I was
called?
worried that you would do that.
Nah, it is. It's good. You get good information on
I
there.
was like, shit, how am I going to explain some of this stuff?
Yeah, because when you're working in publishing, I think it looked like you spent some years at some place called, I think it was called Inside Track, if I read correctly.
Well, so that was post-publishing. So I worked, I left college for New York and worked for a literary agency out there. I had started interning for a lit agency
Yeah.
in San Diego. I worked for a woman named Sandy Dykstra, who is a literary agent. Met someone at that agency that then moved to New York and later offered me a job, or knew of a job that was coming up at the lit agency in Manhattan. And I had my heart set on moving to New York City all through college. So I moved to New York and then came back to the West Coast, but I moved to San Francisco
Yeah.
and kind of struggled with what to do. Wasn't quite sure. This is like, early 20s. Was still working part-time for a lit agent up in Mill Valley, which is Marin County, just north of San Francisco. And long story short, I decided I don't want to do this anymore. I want to do something else. And so I moonlit in politics for a minute, which was another weird kind
I
of.
like it, man. You got your hands in a lot of different bags, man. Writing, painting, dude. I
Yeah,
like it. It's good.
yeah. I hesitate to even mention some of the things because I get sidetracked easily. But basically, I answered an ad on Craigslist, led me into politics, and through that gig, basically raising money for Democratic campaigns, I
Yeah.
met someone that got me the gig at Inside Track, which is relevant because that's where I came back to photography. And Inside Track was a company that so I was a life coach for university students for 7 years,
So
and
that
that
would
was
be would that be like students that are already in the school, or like people that are like thinking about coming to school and looking for guidance, or like how did that kind of work?
students that were already in school. So this is a very random thing. I was in my mid-20s. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I wasn't ready to pursue photography full time. I
Yeah.
didn't even know how to do that. I was feeling pretty lost, and pardon me, I just needed a job.
Yeah.
And a woman that I had met previous on that previous gig, working for fundraising campaigns, had taken a job with this company that was working with university students, and it sounded interesting. So I interviewed and I got the job. And next thing I know, I was coaching university students around the country, almost entirely over the phone, and
Wow.
they were a combination of brick and mortar traditional students, which is 18, 19-year-old kids going to colleges like I did, on campus, and then non-traditional students, so working class adults that were getting their degrees online. And
Hmm.
my job was to work with these people half hour a week to help them figure out what their priorities were such that they could stay in school and continue on and do well. And that was all built around the premise that the dropout rates for universities nationwide are pretty high.
Yeah.
And I don't know what they are now. At the time, it was like almost 1 out of every 2 4-year degree students would not finish.
Because so
It
much
was
money, man. It's
exactly,
crazy.
man. It's a huge drag on the economy, is a huge drag on people's lives. And so the people that started the company that I worked for had come from a background in education. And so mostly I was like a blue collar psychologist, just helping
Wow.
people figure out how am I going to succeed in school and then eventually graduate. I was working with them typically during their first, in some cases, second year.
Wow. That actually seems like a pretty interesting job. Like, because you get the
Was.
it's not similar to photography in a sense because you're interacting with so many different type of people on a day-to-day basis.
It was a perfect layup to portrait photography.
Yeah.
You're kind of, so to speak, getting in people's faces, making them a little uncomfortable,
Yeah.
asking them maybe questions that they don't necessarily want to answer,
Hmm.
but mostly taking an interest in people.
Yeah.
And it was at that job, surrounded by people who are professional coaches, that I met someone who, inside of a half hour long conversation with them, and this is somebody that I didn't know. They were new, we had just hired them. Asked me, "Why aren't you taking pictures anymore?" And I was like, "Man, you just stuck me to a wall." Like,
Yeah.
it's pretty incredible what's possible when you're talking to people who are really listening.
Yep.
And that was 2006. And it was that same night that I went home and pulled my cameras out of the closet. And I thought, if I don't at least try to find out how to make a career out of this, I'm always going to regret it. And I wasn't comfortable with that. So I started carrying my camera with me everywhere I went. And yeah, the rest is history.
Yeah, and like for a lot of people listening, because I got a lot of messages from people like in the similar situation. They got a full-time job and but their dream is to become a photographer and go like freelance full time. Like, how did you kind of make that transition to like you got a full-time job, you got a good career, but then it's like like you said in the back of your mind, photography is what makes you happy. But like, how do you make that transition to pursuing it full time? I guess.
It's the slow, long, hard way.
Yeah.
I so yeah, I think I can't speak for everybody, but I think a lot of people, especially that look like me, that get to be a professional photographer, luck is a huge part of that. Just the fact that I was able to go to college and have access to the internet, to be able to reach out to National Geographic, to meet all these people that would kind of shape and guide my path, is incredibly fortunate. So that was a big part of it. But then you actually got to act on it. And so the Alex Miller, the woman that I just mentioned, who had asked me why I wasn't taking pictures anymore, was kind of what kickstarted the process. And then again, my very supportive parents. My mom has always been a big supporter of photography in my life, and my parents had given me a camera for graduation in high school. And then again, almost 10 years later, when I was kind of getting back into the idea of pursuing it as a career, she bought me a used camera on eBay, a used digital camera, and I started carrying that with me everywhere. And then a friend of mine whom I went to college with, one of my best friends, Emily Payne, she has a studio here in the city, and she was shooting family portraits, working with newborns. That's still her business. And she said, yeah, you can, ask me whatever you want. I'll help you however I can. And then she gave me my first event gig. So she let me borrow a digital camera before I owned my own, to shoot a gig that she couldn't shoot, just so that I could have that experience.
Wow.
And I was still working the full-time job, but that was how I got into making money with photography. And then from there, it was just, one brick at a time, man. Trying to build this house in whatever way that I could. And so I started assisting on weddings. I started learning how to write contracts, just basic contracts. I started learning how to build invoices, but I was still working that full-time job. And it was also at that job that a coworker who had seen me carrying my digital camera around with me everywhere I went asked if he could borrow it, because he had co-founded a theater company here in San Francisco, and they wanted to shoot one of the rehearsals. And so I let him borrow the camera, pardon me. And like 2 or 3 weeks later, I was like, hey, like, how did it work out? Can I see the photos? Because they had deleted them off the card when they gave it back to me. And when I saw the photos, I thought, I think I can do that better. And so I asked if I could come to the theater, and I had an interest in acting because my sister was studying it. And once I got there, I was like, this is awesome. Like, I'm getting to watch people perform plays in this dark room. I'm getting to see how they engage with one another and how a play comes to life. And then I realized I just couldn't get the light quite right. I started working with the guy in the booth to try to control the lights, and it's all continuous lighting, which is great if you're working with continuous lighting that's bright enough. But it wasn't. And so I reached back out to that same friend, Emily, and asked her if I could take the actors into her studio with the director and try to recreate the scenes with the strobes that she owned. And at that point, I think it became clear to me that I was stubborn enough and curious enough and willing enough to just keep going down that path to figure out, just how far I could take it.
And did you have were there like photographers at that point? Were you looking at a lot of other photographers' work and kind of studying the craft? And was there kind of like a goal in mind? Because looking at your work now, it's a lot of, you shoot for the New York Times, you do some cool stuff with A24, which is we'll get into it. It's one of the best movie production companies in the business, I think, right now. But was there kind of goal starting off? Were you even thinking about editorial and that kind of avenue at that point, you think?
Yeah, so it was a combination of interests, and really that's why I decided to pursue photography as a career. Ultimately, it had to do with the fact that I was interested in a lot of different things, and at the time when I was thinking about photography coming back into my life, this is the late aughts, 2007, 2008. I was also thinking about going to grad school to study public policy, and ultimately I realized was I'm not going to be able to satisfy my curiosity in any more effective way than to pursue photography, because that's going to open doors to meeting all kinds of different people that work in all kinds of different arenas. And that was more appealing to me than picking any one of those disciplines and going down that path. which I don't know, maybe that means I'm a generalist in with respect to my interests,
Yeah.
but with photography, it became pretty clear as I got further into it that I needed to have a specialty. Uh, as far as what was inspiring, who was I looking to? I was working, because I'm in San Francisco, I have access to a lot of museums and a lot of great art. I was working right down the street from the SF MoMA, so on my lunch break, I would just go see. I bought a membership early on when I was working at that in the higher education job. And on my lunch break, I would go over and I would just wander the museum, and I would look at whatever was coming in, not just the photo work, but painting,
Yeah.
sculpture, so you name it. And I did that when I was living in New York, and I've done that kind of everywhere that I've traveled. I've always tried to make a little bit of time for art, and so there were a lot of inspirations coming in. I feel like with respect to photography, because I only took one photo class in college. My education in photography came late, and it's still, I feel like I still have so much to learn with respect to who's working currently, let alone who's made work
Yeah.
previously. And I'll never get to the end of that bucket.
Yeah. Not so many people. And
Like
I
seeing
guess,
Diane Arbus's retrospect, which was, I think, the first retrospect of hers in over 2 decades at SF MoMA,
hmm,
and this is, like, I think 2007 maybe, was amazing.
yeah.
Being able to see those photos in person in the museum had such a huge impact on me, and both because of the portraiture, but also because of the street element to it as well. And at the time, I was very interested in street photography. I'm still interested in it, but I was making more street photo images than I was portraits. I just don't show that work because I never found a way to build a career out of it.
Yeah, that's a tough thing to do. Well, yeah, you have one project on your site. Let me see what I forget what it's called. It's I think called Transits, which is
Oh,
kind
yeah.
of, I guess that would be like street photography, right?
Yeah, there's an element of that to it. It's funny. That's a project that I started while I was in New York on a trip there. I don't, however many years ago, where I would just stand in one place and I would photograph people passing in front of the camera.
Yeah.
And this is one example of that. And I it's just sort of a personal artistic interest of mine, and in the writing that I do about this, it's funny that you bring this up because I feel like this is a section of my site that no one has ever looked at except for me.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so I don't have a lot of practice talking about it, but my interest in this in particular has to do with my curiosity about how being photographed or videotaped affects people's behavior.
Yeah.
And what I was particularly curious about in making these images was the fact that I could stand there and just hit the button over and over and over again and see people passing in front of my camera, seemingly not seeing me, take pictures of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm curious about how people behave when they become used to the idea of being on camera all the time. And that touches a little bit on my interest and my concern about living in what some people kind of think of as the modern surveillance state. Trevor Paglen talks a lot about this with respect to facial recognition technology.
Yeah, it's everywhere. Like, look at any building in any like big city has cameras everywhere. Like in not every state. I know in Rhode Island, I just got a freaking ticket like a week ago. They said I ran a red light, I guess. And I got a ticket for it because it was not, they had the camera on. Like they have a camera on every corner, like in Providence, Rhode Island, so they catch you on camera if you speed or stuff like that. I guess, which is just kind of, it's
I've
just,
been there.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and then also the other thing I'll touch on in this particular writing is I have an interest in physics. I never studied physics formally. It's just something that I'm curious about.
yeah,
And there's this concept of something called superstate theory, like the way that particles behave on a subatomic level.
yeah,
And there's this theory that if you stick a cat in a box and you can't see the cat in the box, is the cat alive? Is it dead? well, superstate theory says it's in both states at once. It's a crazy way of understanding um, a division of physics that Einstein referred to as being spooky.
Yeah.
And the idea is that when you observe something, you affect its state. And I'm really curious about that with respect to photography. Like, how are we changing the people that we're seeing, or how are cameras changing the people that they are seeing simply because they are seen? And can we observe that change? Can it be measured? And you'll see in some of those photos, every now and then, someone will have noticed me. And I'm curious in general about how we affect one another without realizing it. There's a lot of subtlety in photography, and it's a way of getting at that concept that we have an impact on each other just by way of passing one another on the street. And then again, if we're passing one another on the street and there are cameras pointed at us, are we growing accustomed to behaving in ways that we wouldn't behave otherwise, because subconsciously we know that we're being videotaped?
Yeah, it is wild. I think about photography nowadays. Like, I have like a 2-year-old niece, and like, there's literally like every day of her life is going to be photographed up to a certain point. And it's like,
Yeah.
for me, like growing up, like, there's pictures of me as a kid, but not to that level. It was like pictures like at my birthday party, because it was like film and like Christmas and stuff like that. But now, like, photography is like, yeah, it's everywhere, because it's in your pocket. And like every kid growing up has like, some kids have like my other friend, yet they have like a hashtag for their kids, so they store their photos like
Yeah.
that, which is just really interesting. This is how photography is utilized now. And then everyone's like their own photo editor to a degree. Like, they're editing and figuring out what they're going to put out there on their social media. And this, like, this how much photography is produced now is just way different than back in the day.
Yeah, I think it takes the joy out of it personally. It's one of the reasons, why I like to print photos. And I think one of the reasons why a lot of people, come back to the point I was making earlier, enjoy the printed material is because it is less overwhelming.
Yeah.
Flipping, how many times has someone wanted to show you a photo and they're flipping through their phone and they're like, just a second,
Yeah.
it's in
Yeah.
here
Once
somewhere.
it's 3,000 photos. Like, yeah, I probably have like 5,000 photos on my phone. It's
But
insane.
I think there's been a sacrifice of joy for the sake of convenience in general, technologically speaking.
Yeah. So in terms of like printing, so like, are you mostly you print like everything that you shoot pretty much, or this kind of the
Yep.
stuff you're kind of that's going to go in your book, or what does the actual act of printing do for you?
Yeah, so definitely don't print everything that I shoot. I couldn't afford that even if I wanted to do that. We up until last year, my wife and I were sharing a studio, in which I would print things occasionally to either to hang up just as a kind of a reminder, or to slip into a box as a way of remembering kind of like that period. The act of printing for me, I think it's funny. Often it's a reminder that there are people that are better at printing than I am. So, but lately I've been working with. There's a group called Light Source, is based here in San Francisco. There are two that I've worked with: Candela Fine Art Printing over in the East Bay, who's worked with a bunch of fantastic photographers. Todd Hito, am I pronouncing his
Oh
last
yeah,
name?
Todd Hido.
Todd Hido, and then Light Source, which has worked with a bunch of great photographers, and so yeah, and in fact I should look up. There are a couple of names that people that I would love to share, but let me see here. I'll bring it up in a moment. Working with people who are professional printers,
Yeah.
has been for me a reminder that the collaboration in photography is really one of the most joyful parts for me. And while I love to print on my own, I just can't print at the level that people who've dedicated
Their
themselves
lives.
to the craft can.
Yeah.
And so it's awesome to see your work treated with a kind of reverence by people who you apply that reverence to the printed matter. So for me, it's really it relates back to going to museums and standing there in front of an image and thinking, this is what that photographer saw.
Yeah.
And when I'm staring at a screen, I am just distracted. It's the tabs open or it's the phone or whatever. But when I'm staring at just a printed image, I'm not going to get a text on that piece of paper.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get an email. Nothing's going to like ping me or distract me. There's something kind of sacred and slow about that.
Yeah,
And the
definitely.
slowness of that, I think, is exactly what a lot of photographers talk about, and even the return to film and film cameras, which is this sort of, I think, a universal sensation that human beings feel when they slow down and concentrate on one thing.
Yeah.
And we're living in an age where we're just very distracted.
Dude,
And
it's bad, man. Like, it's like, even me, it's like I have to like put my phone away sometimes, like, because there's just so many distractions now. I feel like my attention span gets worse and worse. Like, being able to like sit down and watch a movie now is like, you're always just thinking about other shit. So like, I just have to like turn it off or I'll leave it in another room just so you can like sit and be still and like just not worry about all the incoming traffic because it never stops.
yeah, I was going to say that at least with respect to printing, Ward Long, who is primarily been the guy that I've worked with at Light Source, he just released a book called Summer Sublet.
Mm-hmm.
Just a wonderful photographer, a lovely writer, a lovely human being. Pier 24
Wow,
has just made a mention of his book.
that's
Um,
amazing.
when you meet somebody like Ward, who takes the time to understand how your work should look when it's not on a screen,
Yeah.
if you're not a master printer, gives you a way of seeing your work that is as close to being there as possible. And I think, generally speaking, that's what I'm after as a photographer, which is that the thing that drew me to images when I was young and the thing that draws me to making images now is the sensation of actually being there.
Yeah.
So if I've made an image that makes a person feel like they're there, then I've succeeded. And it's easier to feel that way when you're looking at a printed image, I think,
Mm-hmm.
than if you're looking at a screen. And that's not to say that you can't have that feeling looking at a screen, but again, if you can get a text or an email or there's just constantly shit popping up that's just taking your mind away from
Yeah.
what you're looking
It's
at.
kind of like, it's almost, I guess the analogy I would make is like, it's almost like watching a movie at your house versus going to the theater. It's like two different experiences. It's like,
Yeah,
it's
I
kind
love
of,
going to the theater for that reason.
yeah, man, I miss it. That's like my number one thing I miss right now.
Yeah,
Um,
man, I'm sad that this idea that theaters will go away. And even that too, the collective experience, as much as I liked having moments in museums by myself with
mhm.
with a piece of art, sitting with an Agnes Martin by yourself, like the fact that you can do that in a museum
Yeah.
is amazing. Uh, there's also something about the feeling of the collective experience, and a lot of, I think, what I'm talking about in my promo and what I'm approaching in my work is this idea that it takes work to connect with people.
Yeah.
It's not easy to connect with people all the time. I mean, of course, you're going to meet people in your life with whom you just fall in love right away, and that feeling's great. But most of the people that we interact with on a day-to-day basis, it takes a little bit of work, and my work is about honoring that moment where you're trying to relate to other people, whether it's the people in the photograph or the people that you want to see that photograph, or both.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. One of my favorite series you did is Newsstand, where it's this dude, that series is so awesome. I was just kind of curious, like how that kind of came about, and like was it all photographed in one city, or what was that kind of project all
It's
about?
all, yeah, all New York subways. I don't know. I think I started this probably in like 2013 or 2014. It's been a while since I've added to it.
Yeah.
I I don't know if I was looking for something to make a personal project. I mean, it was probably in the back of my mind because it seemed like there were more and more examples of that in photography, you know, as I became more interested in the work that preceded me, the work that people were doing that inspired me,
Yeah.
you know, a series, like a sort of thematically coherent body of work um, isn't just a good way to get people's attention. It's a good way to think about what you're interested in the world. And, you know, I was in New York every year up until a few years ago. I was there at least once, if not twice a year, to see friends. I'm from Pennsylvania, so I would jump down to Pennsylvania to see my grandmother and extended family. And you know, I'd be riding the subway and I would see these, they're all men. I don't think I ever saw a woman working at one of these,
Hmm.
working at these candy stands or sort of like underground bodegas.
Yep.
And I was just fascinated by the color. And I was thinking a lot about Andreas Gursky at the time and some of the images that he had made.
Just the patterns, because it's, yeah, like you said, it's just colors and everything's like organized, and it's like almost like a pyramid, basically. It's wild.
It's just, there was just so much visual information that I was met with. And in fact, that was the last one that you showed was the only one where the gentleman didn't want to be photographed.
Got it.
But I thought, okay, I'm going to start asking these guys if I can take their photo. And for the most part, they were cool with it. You know, like there was one who didn't want to be photographed. Year after I started the project, I went back to the locations that I'd photographed with prints.
Hmm.
And that was a trip because I was walking up to these guys, some of whom I found, with printed photos of them
Yep.
and handing them to them. And you could see the look on their faces, which it started with sort of a like confusion that went to like almost like a mild fear, like, how do you have a photo of me?
He didn't remember it.
So like the light coming on, which was like, I remember this weird dude that asked if he could take my photo,
Yeah.
and their brain was making that connection and they would light up with just the biggest smile. And it was such a cool feeling. And so, you know, part of it was driven just by a curiosity about who these people are. And then some of it was just, you know, purely visual, which is like you could just sit and stare at these images, which in many of them you can see that there are so many magazines up behind these guys
Yep.
with so many images in them. It was in a sense kind of like eye candy, you know, and so I feel like people were going to buy from these stores the same thing that I wanted to provide in the imagery, which is like a snack kind
Y-
of.
Yeah, I think it's just interesting because, like, you know, people living in New York, they interact with these guys like every day. You're buying a water, you're buying a snack, whatever, but you forget that, like, hey, like these are people, and
They're
there's
real
like,
people.
but it's like any like service worker stuff. I always just try to be like conscious of that, because they're helping you out and things like that. But yeah, it's just yeah, it's just one of those everyday things you don't think about as much. But yeah, I think this is my favorite. This because it's like,
That was the other part of it too, is that these human beings seem to be receding into this visual cacophony.
yeah,
And I think in some ways I was also trying to make the point like, hey, there's a human being in here.
yeah,
Like
man.
they're surrounded by all this stuff, and it, you know, especially in New York where it's just everything is constantly moving so quickly, which is one of the things I love about it. These guys aren't asking for attention, you
Nope.
know. And in many cases, they were a little confused and a little bit shy at first about even getting it. And I think part of that is because they're just not used to getting it.
Yep.
Another part of that is just having a camera pointed at you, and maybe again, like I think maybe some of these guys that there were people that didn't want to be photographed, and I think maybe it was because they were concerned that they did, it didn't make them feel safe. I don't know.
Yeah,
They didn't voice that concern, but that's my suspicion.
definitely.
Um, you know, where are these images going to end up? But it does make me curious about who, like, what are their families like? Where do they live? Like, who are these people? And in a sense, I was just kind of ringing that bell, which is like millions of people are passing through the subway every day,
Yeah,
right?
man.
And these guys are watching that happen, and they're there with your water and your candy bar and your magazine, but they're also going home to their families, and they're contributing to the landscape of that city. I should say that after I started this series, I started looking for other examples, like, has
Mm.
anyone else done this? And I can't remember the name. I'd have to look it up. It's been a while since I was working on this, but there are several examples of other people that have dedicated themselves to photographing, not quite in the same style, but the same basic content,
Yeah.
which I think, again, if you dig into the internet looking for examples of an idea that you have, either that you've executed on or that you're thinking of executing on, you're probably going to find somebody else has done it, and,
Oh,
they either did it a long time ago, or they're currently doing it, and they're doing it in a way that's going to blow your mind. Which reminds me of a class I took in college, is critical analysis class, in which a professor was like, if in the next 15 minutes any of you has an original idea, it'd be nothing short of a miracle. Uh,
yeah.
it would,
Yeah. It's like, yeah, don't worry about it. Yeah, because it's like it's your own take on it. It's like
yeah,
people are never gonna stop photographing like the Golden Gate Bridge
yeah.
or like the Grand Canyon. It's like a million people have done it, but it's like, all right, well, let's see what you got. Like, what's your take? That's how I kind of look at it.
Yeah, in a way, it's I think a lot of at least contemporary photography on the internet is, well, I mean, that's too broad. I think that there's too much emphasis on, or has been a lot of emphasis on, like, what catches your eye, right?
Mhm.
Like, not with respect to the working photographers, but what is going to get your attention, right? Everybody's trying to get your attention.
Yep.
Well, whether it's advertising, whether it's Facebook or Google or Amazon, or you name it, like, just to name the big ones, which are, it's easy to take aim on them, but everybody's trying to get your attention. And then all these amazing artists are trying to get your attention too. It's hard to fight I think, what is the compulsion to make images that are just eye catching.
Yeah.
Uh, and the people that make eye-catching images that are also, like, very, very thoughtful, like, those are the ones that I keep coming back to. But yeah, I think you're right. Like, I'm looking for other people's take on things that I have stopped paying attention to. And one of the coolest things about having a camera is you can draw people's attention to something that they're just overlooking.
Yeah. Yep.
Hopefully somebody riding the subway saw one of those images,
Yeah.
and they were like, hey, like, I know that guy.
I buy water from them every
Yeah,
day or whatever. Yeah, for
yeah.
sure, definitely. Um, and I was interested in talking to you because I know setting this up, you mentioned you've been collaborating a little bit with A24,
Mhm.
which is amazing like film production company. They did like Uncut Gems. They did they do Good Times? I forget if they did Good
I
Times.
don't, well, it's same. That's the
Directors.
Safdie brothers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They might have. Either way, great production company. I guess. How do you kind of start working with them, and what kind of projects have you been doing with them?
Well, it was just the one. We've talked about some other stuff, but it came. So I was hired by A24 to shoot pickups on The Last Black Man in San Francisco,
Yeah.
and that came by way of another photographer who's a dear friend, uh, Michael O'Neill, goes by Mo,
Yep.
based in New York, used to be out here. A huge influence on me in a bunch of different ways, has been enormously supportive. He got an email by someone that works at the company about the gig. He couldn't do it. He threw my name in the hat because because he knew that I had shot on features before. And yeah, they reached out and they were like, hey, we've got this indie film. We need someone to shoot pickups. It's going to be Saturday, Sunday. Um, are you interested? We'd love, to have a chat with you.
Yeah.
By the way, we need a decision by, like, the end of the day. And
Wow.
this was a Thursday, or, well, like a Wednesday. And the shoot was going to be on Saturday. And I'm like, this is a terrible idea. I don't know who these people are. I don't know what their script is about. I don't know who, like, I don't know anything. I'm
Yeah.
going into this entirely blind. And for anyone that's ever shown up on a feature set before, you know, sight unseen, a little bit guarded, and a lot of the work is really built around, like, there's a choreography to it, and some of that choreography is relationship building. And I thought, how in the world am I going to be able to make images that are useful? I don't even know what your movie's about.
Yeah.
Um, but I sent an email back and I was like, I've learned the lesson, like, always take the meeting.
Yeah.
And they said, I said, great. I'm like, well, let's chat later today. And then I scrolled further down and I was like, oh my gosh, like, I'm emailing with A24. It's like my favorite production company. Like, of course I'm going to say yes to this gig,
Yeah.
for no other reason than it would just be like, an honor to work with them. And I had mentioned my work with Sorry to Bother You, and they got back to me and they're like, we love it. Let's chat. I chatted, let them know my concerns. They're like, we get it. This is what the movie's about. This is where we're shooting. It's going to Sundance. We don't really have any images that we feel like are appropriate for the way that we want to market the movie. We would love for you to come help us out. And yeah, I showed up on Saturday morning and I had 2 days to shoot with the actors. But basically, I was working closely with the director and then the main actors. So Jonathan Majors and Jimmy Fails.
So are you shooting like while they're actually acting and doing scenes, or it's all set up stuff and you're creating imagery for advertising and marketing purposes for the movie, pretty much?
You know, I I was along. You're always along for the ride.
Yeah.
I was told to get images that they could use to promote the movie at Sundance.
Hmm.
So the way I read that was, it needs to look like a scene from the movie. It needs to have it needs to feel like a piece of key art from the film, but not like the billing image. So this isn't like a studio shot of
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
actors. It's got to read like a piece of key art, but it's got to be in a scene that they're shooting, more or less. And so, I'm basically hanging out watching what they're shooting and waiting for an opportunity to make an image that I think is going to work.
Hmm.
And then when they're moving from scene to scene or they're resetting a scene, I'm trying to get the actors to sit for me in a way that reads like it's part of the film, even if it might not be a scene from the film, but
Yeah.
could work for promotion. So, there's a lot of guesswork that goes into it, but some of that guesswork, if you haven't had an opportunity to read the script, and in this case I hadn't, is built around just working quickly, being very specific about the questions that you're asking the producers, and recognizing that, like, everybody's working on a super tight timeline,
Yeah.
and uh, respecting that and not causing anybody any problems. And that's probably the biggest part. Like, you don't trip over a cable, like, don't make any sound,
Yeah.
don't knock something over. God forbid that's a prop that they would, like, need for the film, that they couldn't get remade in a day. Like, there are a million different ways that you could screw up,
Yeah.
but there are only a few different ways that you can get it right. And I think some of that is just being frank with the people that are your contacts. And in this case, it was a couple of the producers for both A24 and Plan B,
Hmm.
about what I, you know, wasn't sure about. And then they gave me notes after the first day that helped me on the second day, add to the sort of library of images from which they could pull from.
No,
And
that's
then
cool.
the image in my promo that I used was, this is, again, not something that's typical, but I brought some of my own lighting equipment, which
Oh, yeah.
sounds, I'm sure, insane to anybody who's ever
Yeah.
made a film or been on a film. But I brought the equipment because I thought, well, there may be an opportunity to photograph these guys where I won't have the lighting, set lighting to work with,
Yep.
but I'll need extra light. And so that's what I did. And, because I've assisted and shot on commercial sets, I understand how to use their equipment to my advantage, in addition to my own strobes. And so I had an opportunity where I was like, hey guys, like, can I get 5 minutes? I had seen an opportunity to piggyback off of a set that had been built. And so I got them into the set, and I had like 5 minutes, which was amazing. And they were very easy to work with, and I was able to kind of get them into what I felt like was an iconic image.
No, that's pretty cool. Yeah, because the thing with the A24 that I respect is that you can tell they just respect the art, the creative. They're not just producing dog shit out there. It's everything they do is like calculated, and it's like this highly creative. You know.
Yeah, and Joe Talbot and Jimmy Fails really deserve like the lion's share of the credit, at least for this film. If they had been working on this for years,
Yeah.
and it was their hard work and their diligence that got the film to a place where it could really be made.
Definitely.
And then, you know, everybody else that helped bring this film to life, including the photographers that preceded me.
Yeah.
Hi, Ezra. You're gonna get to meet my son real quick.
No worries.
Real quick.
It's all right. We're almost done.
Yeah.
We're almost done.
All of those people preceded me in getting this thing to a place where my work could be seen in the way that it was seen. So I would never have gotten the opportunity to work with A24 if it wasn't for all of those people. But again, the day of, Joe, Jimmy, Jonathan, and then of course, Rob Morgan and some of the other people that are in the film. Rob Reichert, who co-wrote it. Those people are the ones that I feel like, I just am grateful to them. Like,
Definitely.
I couldn't have shown up and done the work. A24 brought me on. It was the people on set, or too many to name here, that made me feel comfortable and gave me the opportunity to jump in and make those images.
Totally.
And again, man, photography is a team sport. You
100.
can't do this job without collaborating with a bunch of other people.
Definitely. And yeah, man, I guess to wrap up, like we're coming to the end of the year. It's been a crazy year. But I guess what's next for you, and kind of any goals moving into the new year, I guess, for your work or anything kind of moving forward?
And the main goal, I think, in addition to getting the promo out, is to really kind of, I don't want to say reignite my career, because I haven't stopped working, but this year I have, like many people, been, I was sidetracked, and some of that was certainly the shutdown pandemic. Some of it is, as you just heard, being a parent. I have a little boy who's 2.5 years old. So, he gets a lot of my attention.
Definitely.
And I think my goal is for this coming year to work writing more into my process. And again, that I made that comment earlier about the promo, and that's why writing is a part of it. There are a handful of editors that I want to work with, and people that I want to work with that I haven't yet worked with. But mainly, I think I just really want to continue to do this job, and I feel very grateful to have gotten to do what I've got to do up to this point. I'd like to be able to continue to do it. I feel like the opportunity to be a steward of photography, however well I might be doing that, I think, like we're all doing our best, is pretty awesome. And then I also want to spend a little bit more time, and one thing this promo process has taught me, on pulling out the work that excites me the most within the portraits. And some of this is a little bit more abstract portraiture work, and using that to build out kind of new series or bodies of work that I'm excited about. And you hear everybody say it, make the work that you want to get, make the work that excites you.
Definitely.
And pursue that, right? Because if you're putting work out there that you didn't enjoy making, you're probably going to get more opportunities to make work that you don't enjoy doing.
That's good, man. Well, Yeah, I guess that's a good point to leave it, man. To shoot what you love and put it out there and just keep hammering away at it, man. But Peter, man, it was great to connect. I'm finally glad we got to talk. And I guess for people listening, if they want to check out more of your work, where's the best place for them to go?
Yeah, so on my website, which is my full name, peterprato.com, it's Prato.
Mm,
And just that's my handle for Instagram. So, but my website's where I'm putting out work. And then also, if anybody has any questions, if there's anyone that is, there are a bunch of people that have given me advice and time over the
Yep.
years. Um, Joe Pugliese, Art
Yep.
Strauer, Chris Buck, Michelle Watt, Emily Barisi.
Hmm.
There's so many people that have helped me. Interns of mine, Avery Wilcox, like just all these people that have given their time and attention. Dan Paddock, Brandon Tozick. Check out Brandon Tozick's work if you don't know it.
Definitely.
Um, there are all these people out there that have inspired me and helped me. If there's anybody out there that has any questions, by all means, reach out. Not just to me, but to people that are making work that inspires you, because you'd be amazed at how willing people are just to make time for a phone call and answer questions, whether it's about a shoot that you're nervous about or, how to get into the business.
Definitely. Well, Peter, man, have a good holidays and good luck in the new year, man. And definitely stay in contact. All right.
You too, Alex. I appreciate it very much. Thanks
Yeah.
for having
Thank you. All right. Bye.
me. Take care.
So there you have it. That was the Peter Prato interview. Just want to thank Peter so much for taking the time to come on the podcast. It was real interesting hearing his journey with photography and everything he's accomplished. Really enjoyed his personal project, gave him a chance, is photographing all the cards he finds on the streets. I just thought it was a really interesting and kind of cool project to work on, and I look forward to following along and seeing where that goes. But definitely go check out Peter's work at peterprato.com, as well as on Instagram at Peter Prato. I'll leave all the links in the description, and you definitely go give him a follow. He's got cool work up there, so I can't thank him enough. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the interview, I'm doing a giveaway for my 200th episode coming up on February 11th. All you need to do to enter is go to the Photo Banter YouTube page, hit subscribe, and leave a comment on the 200th episode giveaway video, and you'll be entered for a chance to win the Sekonic L858D light meter. All you need to do is enter by February 10th, and I'll be announcing the winner on February 11th on the 200th episode. And as always, I'll be having weekly podcasts every week on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, as well as the Photo Banter YouTube page. Thanks so much for listening, and take care.